Okay. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
On behalf of Iskcon Niagara Falls, I would like to welcome everyone present here today to our Saturday programs. Thank you all for joining, and I hope everyone is enjoying the sunny day today, although it's a bit cold. But still, this sunny days are a blessing, somewhat like a blessing during these times. So, the agenda for today's program would be an opening kirtan by Sukhwaj Prabhu, followed by a discussion on the topic of sacrifice by Vaishnava Prabhu, followed by a wonderful kirtan, and then some closing announcements. So, Prabhu, we can begin the kirtan. Over to you. Hare Krishna.
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhagate Shata Bandhu Mui Shabadana Bandhu Mui Shabadana Jahara Prashade Ba He Bhavatoriya Jahara Prashade Ba He Bhavatoriya Krishna Prati Krishna Prati ho Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitit Koriya Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitit Koriya Arana Kori Ho Mani Asha Arana Kori Ho Mani Asha Shri Guru Charani Rati Ishe Uttama Gati Shri Guru Charani Rati Ishe Uttama Gati Jai Prashade Pure Sharva Asha Jai Prashade Pure Sharva Asha Chakudana Diloje Janme Janme Prabhu Shri Chakudana Diloje Janme Janme Prabhu Shri Divya Jan Hare Prakashe To Divya Jan Hare Prakashe To Prema Bhakti Jaha Vite Avidya Vinasa Jate Prema Bhakti Jaha Hoite Avidya Vinasa Jate Mere Gahe Jahara Kare To Mere Gahe Jahara Kare To Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adama Janara Bandhu Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adama Janara Bandhu Lokena Lokera Devana Krishna Tokera Chivana Aha Prabhu Koro Doya Deho Mori Pada Chaya 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 Ebeja Kusuktrivana Ebeja Kusuktrivana Shila Prabhupada Patita Pavana Srila Prabhupada Patita Pavana Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Jaya Gurudeva Jaya Gurudeva Gurudeva Jaya Gurudeva Jaya Gurudeva Jaya Gurudeva Jaya Gurudeva Jaya Gurudeva Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Vasya Chanishatadine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Vasyacha Nishatarini Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadra Shri Vashadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadra Shri Vashadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ramo Hare Ramo 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ramo Hare Ramo 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Ramo Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare.
Venkat Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for the very wonderful Kirtan, Prabhu. It was very blissful to hear such a nice melody. Moving on with our program, we will have His Grace Vaishnava Prabhu speaking on the topic sacrifice. His Grace Vaishnava Prabhu is a very experienced and seasoned speaker. He's been in the Krishna conscious movement for over 30 years. Prabhu is a disciple of His Holiness Bhakti Marg Swami, and he joined the movement in Durban, South Africa. Apart from his experience and knowledge in the scriptural studies, Prabhu has been very instrumental in establishing various programs like the Toronto Sunday School programs, as well as establishing the Iskcon Brampton Center. And currently, His Grace Vaishnava Prabhu serves as the temple president of Iskcon Niagara Falls. So let us all please welcome Vaishnava Prabhu and uh, hear from him on the topic of sacrifice. Over to you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna and welcome to our Saturday program. Today's program is going to focus on the word sacrifice and its very early beginnings at the dawn of creation. I'm going to refer to the Srimad Bhagavatam for our opening sloka. That's Canto 4, Part 1, Chapter 2. Now, this is a conversation between Vidura and the great sage Maitreya. So here's the sloka. Bhave silavatam seste daksha duti vatsalaha vidvesam akrat kashmat anadrityatmajam satim. The English translation is, Vidura inquired, why was Daksha, who was so affectionate towards his daughter, envious of Lord Shiva, who is the best among the gentle? And why did he neglect his daughter Sati? Oma Gyanam Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuran Manitam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha. I was born in darkest ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with a torch of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him. So let's take a look at the background to the story. We're going to go back to the very early days of creation, and we go back to the life of Daksha. Daksha was Lord Brahma's son, and he was known as a Prajapati. He was given the function to procreate and populate this universe. Now, before that, we had the first ruler of mankind, and his name was Swayambhuva Manu. Now, Swayambhuva Manu, he was married to Satarupa, and they had three daughters, Akuti, Devahuti, and Prasuti. They had two sons, Priyavrata and Uttanapad. Now, Prasuti was married to Daksha, and through that marriage, they had a daughter named Sati. And Lord Brahma suggested to Daksha, his son, you should give your daughter Sati in marriage to Lord Shiva. So the question is now, why was Prajapati Daksha, who was so affectionate to this particular daughter, Sati, he neglected her and he avoided her? The story goes back to this point when Prajapati Daksha decided to hold a very huge sacrifice. And at that sacrifice, Lord Shiva was in attendance with many, many other demigods and sub-demigods and many sages and saintly people. But Lord Shiva, who's known as the greatest of all Vaishnavas, as quoted in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Vaishnavanam Yata Shambhu, he is also Chara Achara, the spiritual master of the entire universe. Lord Shiva is always peaceful. He's Atmarama. is self-satisfied. He's Bhutanath. He is the friend of the ghosts and the demons, and also is highly respected amongst all the Vaishnavas. His Sampradaya is known as the Rudra Sampradaya. So why did Daksha become so envious of such a great personality who also happened to be his own son-in-law? So at that time, Daksha was preparing for a huge sacrifice known as the Vajapaya sacrifice. Now the name Vajapaya, many of us may remember from the ex-Prime Minister of India, Atul Bihari Vajapaya, which signifies that this Prime Minister's family had come down in a long line of the priests that conducted these sacrifices known as the Vajapaya sacrifice. And this Vajapaya sacrifice is a sacrifice that you have to do before you perform the Brihaspati sacrifice. So this was part one of part two of these sacrifices. Now in the Vedas, there are a lot of sacrifices recommended, especially in the Rig Veda. And at that time, Lord Indra was the deity that was most pleased through all these sacrifices. Now, there are other sacrifices that are very famous, which is known as the Ashvamedha sacrifice, the Rajasuya sacrifice, the Vajapaya sacrifice, Brihaspati sacrifice, and about 70 other very important sacrifices as well. Now, nobody can exist in this life without making a sacrifice. We find that young children will give up the playtime to study, so that will bear fruit for them later on in life. Parents go to work, giving up leisure time. Soldiers may give up their lives on the battlefield for their country. And people may relocate from their homes to make way for dams, roads, and other mega projects. People also go to work for the benefit of the children. So everybody is making a sacrifice. It's something that you cannot escape in this life. Now, when we go to the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 3, verse 10, Lord Krishna says, Shaha yagne praja siristva puruvavacha prajapati anena prasras rish gadam esa vo astu ista kamaduk. The translation is, in the beginning of creation, the Lord of all creatures sent forth generations of men and demigods along with sacrifices for Vishnu and blessed them by saying, be thou happy by this yajna, because by its performance you will obtain all desirable things for happy living and achieve liberation. So this was a suggestion in the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 3, that at the beginning of creation, sacrifices were part of all activities. That means the human beings had to perform sacrifice to please the demigods, and demigods being pleased, they will provide all the necessities of life. Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 4:31, Nayam loka asti ayajnaya kuta anya kuru sattama. O best of Kuru's dynasty, without sacrifice, no one can never live happily on this planet in this life and what of the next. So sacrifice is an integral part of an existence. Now, a little description of some of the other sacrifices. One of the most popular sacrifices in those days was the Ashvamedha sacrifice. Now, this was a horse sacrifice by a victorious king to obtain power and glory. So he would send this horse along with a very huge entourage, and it would be a specifically selected horse, mostly white in color with some black spots. And this horse, whichever state that this horse entered into, that king would have to owe allegiance to the king that sent that horse. So this was going to provide prosperity for all the kingdom. Now, the Rajasuya sacrifice was only performed by the all-powerful king who had conquered all the other kings. To establish himself as an emperor, this Rajasuya sacrifice was performed. Now the Vajapaya sacrifice, which Prajapati Daksha was going to perform, this was the mega sacrifice, the Olympic Games of bygone ages. It was a multi-million-dollar production if you have to convert the cost in today's dollars. And there was a lot of soma juice being drunk and many animals were sacrificed. But those animals that were sacrificed were not put to slaughter. They were more to test the Brahmanical potencies of those priests, that those priests were so potent that they could say mantras that would light up the Arani wood. So, but that's not available today. And then we have the Brihaspati sacrifice, which is Brihaspati, the priest of Lord Indra, and a sacrifice is made to him to ward off all evil effects. So these are the four major sacrifices. Now, in attendance to the Vajapaya sacrifice performed by King Prajapati Daksha, there were many, many thousands of people in attendance because this was a huge festival that will carry on for many years. And it's great, great expense. And the paraphernalia was very extensive. That cannot be done today. Now, when Daksha entered the sacrificial arena, his bodily luster was so effulgent, like a blazing sun, that he bathed the entire assembly in this glowing light. Immediately, all the personalities rose up in respect to Prajapati Daksha. But only one person did not rise, and that was Lord Shiva. He was sitting in meditation. So Daksha began to speak, infuriated that his very own son-in-law would not rise to offer him respect. And then he called Lord Shiva many. He said that Lord Shiva was ill-mannered. He was shameless. And he polluted the proceedings. And that Shiva is dishonest. And he's my subordinate. And yet he refuses to offer respects to me. And then he termed Shiva Yasagyan. That means this person, Shiva, he destroys the fame of people. But actually, the actual meaning of that phrase was, Shiva is so powerful that all others' fame is diluted in his presence. And Daksha also used the term Nirapatrapa. He means that this Shiva, look at his behavior, he's so stunted. But the actual interpretation of that is that Lord Shiva gives shelter to those who are stunted and those who need shelter. So he went on to embarrass Lord Shiva and say many disrespectful things. And he praised his daughter, Sati. He said, my daughter is so pure, and yet she married this person of so much of impurity. And it's because of Lord Brahma's insistence that I gave my daughter in marriage to Lord Shiva. This Shiva, he lives in the crematoriums. He is naked most of the times. He smears ashes on his body, and he wears a garland of skulls and bones. Because of his unruly behavior today, I will not allow him to have any of the oblations from the sacrifice. But this was a blessing, because these oblations were meant for the pleasure of the demigods, who were very materialistic. But Lord Shiva was situated on a higher plane than that. Now, Lord Chaitanya, as one, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who appeared 500 years ago, that's Lord Krishna appearing in the guise of a devotee, he warned the Vaishnavas not to blaspheme other Vaishnavas, because that's a very serious offense, an aparad. And he compared this offense to a mad elephant. Assuming you set up a very beautiful garden and you put so much of labor in your garden and you spend so much of time and energy, and then, like a mad elephant, you destroy that garden. It's the same thing as you build up your pious credits in this life. And if you offend a Vaishnava or a devotee of the Lord, it's just like a mad elephant rushing to your garden and destroying all that hard work of yours. So in the assembly, in this sacrificial assembly, there were many followers of Shiva present, and there were many followers of Daksha. But there was one particular follower of Shiva. His name was Nandishwara. Nandishwara was raging with anger, and he immediately wanted to terminate the life of Daksha and his followers. And he hurled all kinds of abuse and curses at the followers of Daksha. He said that Daksha will get the face of a goat because being a Prajapati and being too much attached to procreation, he will end up with the face of a goat. He said Daksha will continue in the cycle of birth and death. And Nandishwara went on to criticize all the Brahmanas. Normally, Brahmanas are meant to inquire into what is Brahman. What is the Brahman? I am Brahman, Aham Brahmasmi. But he said that the Brahmanas will degrade, they will lose all their potency because of this offense to Lord Shiva on behalf of Daksha. All the Brahmanas, he cursed them. Now, in this age, the situation is quite different as compared to the Brahmanas of the ancient times. The Brahmanas of the ancient times were very, very powerful. They could recite all the mantras properly. And their main goal was to elevate human society at large. But the status of today's Brahmanas does not meet the quality of the Brahmanas of yesteryear. Today's Brahmanas cannot recite the mantras effectively as the Brahmanas of ancient times. Today's Brahmanas do not have the quality of the Brahmanas of ancient times. Therefore, we have to consider very carefully when we practice any ritualistic activities, because it'll be very difficult for the Brahmanas of today to get the result that you are looking for. You may feel sort of satisfied that you had some ritual done in your home and everything, you kind of feel good. But be rest assured that the potency is not there, the effect will not be there. That is why, for this age of Kali, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has prescribed the chanting of the holy names of God, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, as the only means of sacrifice. This is the Yuga Dharma for the age of Kali, and it is so simple. All it requires is the absence of a Brahmana, but the presence of the sound vibration. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. The Brahmanas of today claim to be Brahmanas by birth, and that is not the prerequisite. One has to be a Brahmana by qualification. Just like if you take a dentist or a doctor, you cannot say that the son of a dentist or the son of a doctor is a doctor or a dentist. They have to qualify to earn those job titles. Similarly, the Brahmanas of today must qualify to earn that position, but there's hardly any in this present age who will meet the stringent qualities of days gone by. So what happened? After Nandishwara and his followers hurled curses at the followers of Daksha, well, sage Brigu got up and he cursed the followers of Lord Shiva. And this went on, this cursing to and fro. Now, Brigu cursed the devotees of Shiva that they will end up as atheists. And this was fulfilled later on in life with the appearance of Shankaracharya, who came as an incarnation of Lord Shiva to mislead the people at the time from a Buddhist type of philosophy to a more closer philosophy to the Vedic philosophy. He was trying to get them away from a situation of voidism to a situation where at least there's some super God or presence that exists. And Brigu cursed the followers of Lord Shiva that they will take to eating meat, drink alcohol, they will smoke ganja, and they will follow no rules and regulations. Now, hearing these curses and counter curses, Lord Shiva walked away from the sacrificial arena. He didn't say anything, he didn't object, he didn't challenge anyone, he just simply walked away. Now, this situation has caused Sati, his wife, a lot of grief. Lots and lots of grief. All because her father was so proud and envious of Lord Shiva. She was disappointed. Now, the follow-up sacrifice was coming up. That is the Brihaspati sacrifice. Now, Sati in Shiva's home could see from her home all the celestial beings heading towards the home of Daksha. They were all traveling in their airplanes in beautiful garments and ornamented with the most expensive jewelry. And she saw relatives and friends in the airplanes. And she also wanted to be part of that festival. But she saw Lord Shiva's mood and that Shiva was not going to attend this particular sacrifice. But she desperately wanted to go. She wanted to be with all her family and all her friends. But she appealed to Lord Shiva and said, listen, how about we going to attend my father's sacrifice? But Lord Shiva says, it's okay, we can go, but I don't think you're going to feel very much wanted in your father's home. All because of me. He has so much of antagonism towards me that you will feel the pain of that antagonism as well. So desperately, Sati was so desperate to go to see the sacrifice and all her friends and relatives. Somehow, she did not take the advice of Lord Shiva, who said, don't go, you will be sorry. And she made her way. So Shiva's followers also accompanied her to the sacrifice. Now, Daksha was endowed with education, austerity, wealth, beauty, youth, heritage, etc. The problem with these, how should I say, assets, they can be put to the wrong use. Sometimes with people with too much of education, too much of wealth, too much of beauty, they make other people's life a misery. It's like a serpent whose fangs touch the pure milk. That milk will turn to poison, just like a serpent with its lips touching the milk turns the milk into poison. Similarly, these so-called assets that meant to do good to mankind can be abused. And Daksha Prajapati was in the same position. He abused his great heritage, his great education, his great wealth, and he attacked a Vaishnava. So he had committed a great offense. Krishna quotes in the Bhagavad Gita that there are many people like this. In verse 2, chapter 2, verse 42 and 43, Yam imam pushpitam vacham prabhavanti avishpashita vedavata rata patha na anyat asti vadana kama atmana swarga para janma karma phalapadam kriya visesa bahulam bhoga aishvarya katim prati. The translation for that is men of small knowledge are very much attached to the flowery language of the Vedas. which recommend various fruitive activities for elevation to their heavenly planets, resultant good birth, power, and so forth. Being desirous of sense gratification and an opulent life, they say there's nothing more than this. So what is this? The Rig Veda has got prescriptions for many ritualistic processes that can help you to elevate yourself to higher planetary systems, have good birth in your next life, and have good karma and excessive wealth and opulence. And that's what these Vedas can do for you. Now, Krishna is rejecting this. He says that these people who subscribe to these ritualistic processes, they are so captivated by the side effects of these rituals that they forget the real goal of these sacrifices. The real goal of these sacrifices is for the advancement of human civilization. That is to get closer to the final destination, that is the spiritual kingdom. Instead of approaching that destination, they bury themselves in a perpetual cycle of birth and death by following these Vedic ritualistic processes for the wrong reasons. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 7:20, Kamaste te hrityana prapadyante anya devata tam tam niyamam astaya prakritya niyata swaya. That is, those whose intelligence has been stolen by material desires surrender unto the demigods and follow their particular rules and regulations and worship according to the natures. So here Krishna is kind of rejecting these demigod worship and his ritualistic processes. In Bhagavatam, Krishna says, Akarma sarma kama va moksha kama udaradi tivrena bhakti yojana yadeta purusham param. He says, if you don't want material things, if you want material opulence, if you want liberation, with your finer intelligence, if you engage that in full devotional service to Supreme Personality of Godhead, you can get all of that. So you don't have to practice these ritualistic performances as prescribed in the Vedas. That was for a bygone age, but now this is not practical. There's three things in this life that we cannot escape. One is our Sanatan Dharma, our eternal duty, our nature. We cannot wipe that off. The fact that we are servant, Nitya Das, we cannot wipe that off. And the fact that you cannot get anything in this life without sacrifice, we cannot wipe that out. The three things, your eternal religion, which is your Sanatan Dharma, your eternal duty, that's going to be with you forever. You're a servant. Every person is a servant. Starts off with the person being a servant to his own body, his mind, senses, and all his desires. He's a servant. If you extend that, he becomes a servant to his wife. He goes out, works for 40 years, and produces some Lakshmi so that he can make his wife and family happy. So he's a servant to himself, he's a servant to his wife, he's a servant to his children. And if he feels a bit philanthropic and a bit humanitarian about that, he may extend that to his neighbors and poor people in society. And that goes on and on and on. But everyone is a servant, whether he or she likes it or not. We are all servants. But if we surrendered to being the proper servant of the proper person, then we will be properly situated. We have to reestablish ourselves to the position of being a servant of God. And by being a servant of God, we'll be a servant to all mankind as well. Just like watering the tree, you water the roots of the tree, then every part of the tree will be nourished by that water. You cannot pour water on the leaves, on the branches, etc. The tree won't flourish. You have to pour water on the root. So Krishna consciousness is giving a very nice prescription that why do you want to waste your time pouring water on all the leaves and branches? Why don't you just simply pour the water on the root? And the root being Krishna. If you feed Krishna your love, your bhakti, and you surrender unto him, then all of creation will benefit from that. So these Mayavadis or these people do not subscribe to Krishna consciousness or the path of bhakti. They are very dangerous. Some of them seem to be very, very educated and very advanced spiritually, transcendentalists, but they know better than a serpent with jewels on their head. A serpent is a serpent, whether it has jewelry on its head or no jewels. A serpent's natural tendency is to bite someone without provocation. That's how serpents are. And simple, this was this position of Daksha. Shiva was simply sitting down and he was meditating upon the super soul within, and Daksha was like a snake, biting him with all his insults. It's just, Daksha is no different than a materialistic devotee, a materialistic person at least, who attacked the innocent devotees of God. Normally, what happens in society when people are advancing spiritually and try to purify their existence, the non-devotees have a tendency to criticize and find fault. It's very easy to do that. Instead of promoting the devotees' advancement, they will find fault. That's the tendency of materialistic people, just like snakes, biting the innocent devotees. So Shiva was making the point that there was no fault when he did not rise up to greet Daksha. Shiva was meditating upon the super soul within himself, and that same super soul is present in the heart of every living entity. So there was no difference whether Shiva rose up or whether he sat down and offered respects. It was the same thing. But Daksha, he was not on this very elevated platform, and he did not realize that. Now, Sati, she went to the house of Daksha for this second sacrifice, the Brihaspati sacrifice. But when she went to her own father's house, she was not greeted by her father. Only her mother and sister took it upon themselves to welcome her to that home. And she felt very, very disheartened that the father was not there to welcome her and greet her and comfort her. She was so upset. She was so upset. She praised all the good qualities of Lord Shiva, and she attacked Daksha for his callousness. Now, because Daksha was so insulting to Lord Shiva, she decided to remedy the situation. Now, normally, when a Vaishnava or a devotee of God is blasphemed, if the person is a Brahmana, he should simply close his ears and walk away. If he is a Kshatriya, he should take up arms and put an end to the life of the blasphemer. If it's a Vaishya or a Sudra, they should simply commit suicide. That is a recommendation for a long time ago. I don't think that's practical today. But Sati, at that time, being a lady and in the Vaishya category, she decided to end her life. And that way, she will put an end to part of Daksha's body, which is her own body. So she sat down in a meditative posture, facing north, and then she, in a yogic trance, she decided to control the 6 life forces in her body. These are called the Sat Chakras. She moved the life air from her abdomen to her navel, and then to her heart, and then to her throat, and then to her eyes, and then to the top of her head. And in that way, she was able to move the life force out of her body and gone. Now, they say that her body caught on fire. But according to Jiva Goswami and other great sages, they say that by yogic samadhi and transcendental ecstasy, she was to put an end to a material body with the fire of transcendental ecstasy and yogic samadhi. And then she transferred herself to the womb of another person. According to some sages, it was the womb of Menaka, and she became Parvati. So Shiva and Parvati are never disconnected. They are always together. Shiva Sati, Shiva Parvati. Now, in Satya Yuga, the prescription was meditation. In Treta Yuga, it was sacrifices. In Dwapara Yuga, it was deity worship. And in Kali Yuga, the dharma for this age is Sankirtan. There's a quote from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, chapter 5, verse 32. Krishna Varnam Tisa A Krishnam Sangha Upanga Ashta Parshadam Yagne Sankitam Pranay Praye Yajanti Hi Su Medasa. The translation is, in this age of Kali, intelligent persons perform congregational chanting to worship the incarnation of Godhead, who constantly sings the name of Krishna. Although his complexion is not blackish, he is Krishna himself. He is accompanied by his associates, servants, weapons, and confidential companions. So when we talk about sacrifice, which is the theme of this talk today, in the days gone by, sacrifices were very elaborate, very extensive, and very expensive. And the right type of atmosphere existed in those days with the right type of quality brahmanas to perform the sacrifices. In this day of Kali, this age of Kali, we do not have the financial resources, the paraphernalia, and the expert brahmanas to perform sacrifices like days gone by. So fortunately, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has come and he say, away with all sacrifices, away with all rituals. The only ritual for this present age of Kali is the chanting of the holy names of God. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. In the words of Hare Krishna Rama, all the energies of God are invested in these words. And when you chant these holy names of God, God will be present in your atmosphere at that time. He's always there. As long as you chant the holy names of God, God will be present right in front of you. He's non-different from his name. The name of God and God himself are identical. So that is the power of the chanting of the mantra. So there's a big blessing to be born in this age of Kali, because you have the best form of sacrifice, which is the chanting of the holy names of God. This is so fantastic, so amazing. And this chanting of the holy names of God will help you put an end to the cycle of birth and death. No more birth, no more death, no more old age, no more disease. It'll be all gone in due course of time if you faithfully and sincerely chant these holy names of God. So thank you very much for your attendance, and I'll hand you back to our MC. If there's any questions, we have expert personalities in attendance. We can get them answered for you. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Vaishnava Prabhu, for that wonderful class and the explanation on how important chanting of the holy name is in this particular age. So the platform is now open to any questions and discussions. So please feel free to unmute yourself and share your comments.
If no one else has something, I had a point of discussion.
Thank you.
Prabhu, you mentioned the different qualities of Brahmins in different ages, and also regarding the sacrifices of previous ages are different. The current form of sacrifice is Sankirtan Yajna. I was wondering if you can comment a little bit about different qualities of that sacrifice. The sacrifice of Sankirtan, regarding the quality of that sacrifice, what kind of variances there are, or do you understand my question?
Yeah, please rephrase, Prabhu.
Okay. You were mentioning different qualities of Brahmins, and the contemporary Brahmins fall far short of the Brahmins of bygone ages. And then the different kinds of sacrifice you were mentioning, as the theme of the talk is sacrifice. So you're mentioning how the current sacrifice is Sankirtan Yajna. This is the sacrifice of the chanting of the holy names. So I was just wondering if you might comment a little bit about the quality of the Sankirtan Yajna. How much does it vary according to different parameters, and what in other words, within the scope of Sankirtan Yajna, what kind of spectrum of results are possible? Does that make it clear?
Yeah, that's a very interesting and a very broad type of question. I mean, it's, we can go here on forever and ever, but
Sure.
Different ages, there were different prescriptions for different ages. We know in the Satya Yuga that people lived for a very long time, probably 100,000 years. In the Treta Yuga, they probably lived for 10,000 years. Dwapara Yuga for 1,000 years, and in Kali Yuga, our life is shortened down to almost 100 years. So different ages had these different prescriptions, but the fortunate part of the Sankirtan Yajna is that because it's the holy names of God, it's on what we call a transcendental platform. Now, when Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that these personalities who followed the Vedas in another time, they were mostly interested in materialistic advancement, like going to the higher planetary system, Swarga. They want to go to Swarga. Now we know from the highest planet down to the lowest planet are all places of birth and death. Abrahma Bhuvana Loka, Punar Avatino Arjuna. So we know they are all places of birth and death, disease and old age. So no matter what you do according to those Vedic sacrifices, even if you went to the topmost planet, you will still finish up your pious activities and you'll end up back on this planet. So it does not give you an out of the perpetuity of old age, birth, death, and disease. That means you come back. You may get a better birth, you may get materialistic advancement and opulence by practicing those yajnas, but still the bigger goal of life, that means no birth, no death, etc., and go back to your original home, which is in the transcendental world, Golokul Vrindavan. The object of Sankirtan Yajna is of the topmost quality because it can give you the highest goal of life. If we understand what the goal of life is, that is to reestablish our lost loving relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then the process of Sankirtan Yajna is a good match because that will give us that result. That is the reestablishment of our lost loving relationship with God, our eternal Swarup, and our other condition that we had in the spiritual world will be restored to those positions. That's what Sankirtan Yajna can do for you. Meditation in the other ages may not do that for you. Unless you meditate on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then there's a chance that you'll advance to the higher, out of the materialistic cosmos, you may go to the spiritual world. But temple worships, Lakshmi Narayan, and all the other big temple worships are based on awe and reverence. That means you go to these temples, and most of the times, it's a good thing to do. To go to temple is better than not going to temple. But it's a step in the right direction. But the attraction is more the awe and reverence. And what can the God give me still? The bottom line is, if I'm in distress, if I have some difficulty in my jobs, if if there's any kind of difficult situation facing me, I may go to the temple to seek solace from the deity that's present there. But again, the objective is not a transcendental objective. It may be a materialistic objective. So in most of the other cases, the objective is materialistic and not transcendental or spiritual. Whereas the boon in the Kali Yuga, or the boon of chanting the holy names of God, it not only gives you material, akarma sarva karma, whether you're on material or spiritual advancement, you just have to take to bhakti yoga, which is a surrender to God, and chant his holy names, and you get both. All your needs, the material successes that you get is merely a byproduct of chanting the holy names of God. It's not what you're looking for, but it comes automatically. Moksha, which is liberation, is a byproduct of chanting the holy names of God. Devotees do not aspire for moksha because when they surrender to God and chant the holy names, they already have moksha. They're already liberated because they understand they are not this body. So they're in a very advanced platform. They may appear to be engaged in materialistic activities, which keeps the body and soul together, because you have to pay your rent, you have to pay your mortgage, etc., etc. You have to do certain things. But they are not, how shall I say, overwhelmed with that side of life. They are more attached to the transcendental side of life. Now, I hope I answered part of your question or some of your question.
Yeah,
But if
it's a
I'm
good discussion. It's a good
sorry,
discussion. It's a very good discussion. Just sometimes I wonder about the very possible variances. Like, does everyone who comes to accept this yajna, are they automatically sort of fully transcendentally motivated? Or what scope is there for, like, we see people also coming to the movement or coming to this form of sacrifice, and then maybe after some time going away. And it depends on the individual. There's many stories, people, there's four kinds of people who come to take shelter of the Lord. And sometimes when the fulfillment of those initial impetuses are fulfilled, then sometimes they go away for whatever reason. So just the adherence to the purity of the idea of full transcendence. I like the discussion about the sort of focus and the concentrated aspect of the yajnas, whereas in other ages there's a lot of distractions towards material possibilities. In this day and age, we don't even most of us don't even know about those possibilities until we start reading the literature.
Your question about whether people, what is the motivation for people to visit temples? The attraction to a temple, on one level, it could be the easing of some problem, some pressure, some challenges in life. People may approach deity, as Krishna says, as you say, 4 kinds of people are attracted to me for different reasons. And so, but that's a way, that's Krishna's way of attracting people.
Oh, absolutely.
It's one of the ways.
Yeah.
But the motivation we cannot judge. We do not know what the motivation is of any person that enters a religious organization. We don't know.
No, it's not to analyze the individual's motivation per se, but just to see the possibilities even within ourselves, because as we do make some advancement or come in touch with the holy name and devotees, sometimes there's a shift of our focus, or desires arise or distractions come about. So it's an interesting discussion.
A little advancement of this path, on this path will protect one from the greatest danger. So one thing we know for sure, no matter what the motivation, no matter how deep the sincerity is or how shallow it is, that little advancement is the starting point on the journey back to Godhead.
Yeah.
So no matter what happens in this life, if we took to this process, there is no loss or
No
diminution,
loss.
right?
No loss
So-
at all. Okay.
No loss at all. So it doesn't matter if the devotees, for some reason, for things that are beyond the control, they deviate, so-called deviate from the path, they will be restored
Sure.
in a future day, at a future time, back
Oh,
on the path.
Yeah.
So Sachit, would you like to comment?
Hare Krishna. It was a nice discussion between the two of you when you covered uh, the majority of the points. The only thing, the Prabhu's question was that the significance differences, actually speaking, even in the past, Dhayato Vishnu, in the times of the Satya Yuga, the Yuga Dharma was meditating on Vishnu. So it is still the Supreme Lord whom the pure devotee's intention was to meditate on. Tretayam Makai, in the age of Treta Yuga, it was yagyas or fire sacrifices, homes. And ultimately, the goal of any fire sacrifice is Vishnu. And Dwapare Paricharyanam, as mentioned by Vaishnava Dasa Prabhu, that in the age of Dwapar, maximum and elaborate temple worship was performed as the Yuga Dharma. And the temple worship meant the Adhishtat Deva of Vaikuntha or Vasudev Krishna. And then Kalo Tad Hari Kirtanam. And in Kalyug, the process is Sankirtan, which Prabhuji also mentioned. But ultimately, there was some in there who had other motives, like mentioned by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, Arthi, Artharthi, Jnani, and Jigyasa. But the purest of the purest desired the satisfaction of Vishnu or Krishna. So, like the Srimad Bhagavatam, a verse comes to my mind where it says, Vasudeva Paraveda, Vasudeva Paramakaha, Vasudeva Param Jnanam, Vasudeva Param Tapaha, Vasudeva Parodharmo, Vasudeva Paragati. The meaning is pretty simple. Vasudeva Paraveda, the ultimate goal of studying the Vedas is beyond piety, is to obtain Vasudeva or any of his incarnations. Vasudeva Paraveda, Vasudeva Paramakaha. The goal of sacrifices, like in the Treta Yuga, fire sacrifices, yajna, home, is to obtain or to satisfy some siddhi haritoshanam, to satisfy Sri Krishna or his incarnations, etc. So, but the difference between the Sankirtan, Kalota Hari Kirtan, especially due to the divine presence of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Srila Prabhupada mentions that Mahaprabhu and Krishna, they do not come in every Dwapar and in every Kali. They come every 10,000 cycle. So, especially the Kali, when Mahaprabhu appears, it's called the Golden Kali. And due to the mercy of Mahaprabhu, this whole Sankirtan has a different facet or a dimension in the highest concept of theism. And that highest concept of theism, as mentioned by Prabhuji early in the words Hare Krishna and Rama, basically, it in a very simple way to understand it that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also mentions in his Sistastakam second verse, Namna Makari Bahuda Nija Sarva Shaktis. I have invested all my energies, especially my internal potency. Nija, the word Nija is of a very important significance. Sarva Shaktis, all energies. So the word Hara encompasses all the energies of the Supreme Lord that are transcendental in nature and headed by Srimati Radharani, who is the pinnacle or the zenith of service personified. So that's the word Hara. And that also includes all our Gaudiya Vaishnava Acharyas, who are none other than the intimate associates of Radharani and her intimate servitors, like the Manjaris and the Sakhis. So they are present in the word Hara. And Krishna is the all-attractive Krishna, Syam Sundar, in Golok Vrindavan. Prabhupada mentions that there are many types of Krishna, but we are only interested in the son of Nanda Maharaj. If you, in particular, read the purport of Bhajahu Remana Sri Nanda Nandana, Prabhupada mentions that. So Krishna is in the spiritual world, is in Dwarka. That's a planet in the spiritual sky. There is Mathura, a planet in the spiritual sky, but there is Golok Vrindavan. So the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and specifically in short, if one, under the guidance, especially of someone like Srila Prabhupada, or the sincere followers of Srila Prabhupada, or the sincere followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, if under their guidance, when they chant the holy names, especially the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, the result is of the topmost in nature, where the ultimate of the ultimate service to the divine couple Radha and Krishna is guaranteed when they are purified and when they actually leave their bodies. So there's a big difference in one sense, because the Mahamantra was there even in the discussion between Naradji and Brahmaji in the Kali Shantarana Upanishad in some Satya Yuga. So the Hare Krishna Mahamantra existed. Even it's been existing since time immemorial. And at that time, naturally, the Mahamantra's original, the sequence was Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. But with the coming of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he changed it, he tweaked it rather. He did not change it. He made it Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, adding the highest bonus in theism, which is the service of Sri Radharani, which is considered the topmost for all Gaudiya Vaishnavas. And ultimately, what Prabhupada mentions is that the two words that I've never heard before from any other theistic personality or any philosophy is Krishna consciousness. This is a very, very amazing word that Srila Prabhupada coined. And even with the Mahamantra, one can be, there are so many devotees in South India chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. But their ultimate Hare means Lakshmi Devi, or the servitors of Lakshmi Devi, the different Lakshmis in Vaikuntha. And Krishna means the all attractive personality in Vaikuntha, which could be Lord Ramachandra or Vishnu. So it depends on the consciousness of how one is chanting those words. For example, I see that your name, or if I see my good friend Vaishnava Das Prabhu, if I say very nicely Vaishnava Prabhu, so obviously there's a certain consciousness behind those words when I am uttering the name Vaishnava Prabhu. And then sometimes when somebody's upset and when they say, hey, Vaishnava Prabhu, with a very firm tone, then the entire consciousness behind chanting the same name is different. So I hope this analogy kind of gives us an insight. Even when we are chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, if we do it under the proper guidance, then we are guaranteed the highest of the highest in theism, Janmadiyasya, like the Srimad Bhagavatam mentions, or the Vedanta Sutra mentions, which is the ultimate service of Radha and Krishna in Golok Vrindavan. So I hope this throws some light. I tried my best to.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Dvija Prabhu, thank you very much for that nice question.
Well, thank you for the discussion. Unfortunately, I have to run quickly, but
Thank you.
I'm
Thank
glad
you.
glad I saw the notice on your Facebook. So
Thank
maybe
you.
all the best.
Jai Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Venkat?
Yes, are there any other questions or comments?
So we can have closing kirtan maybe.
Yes.
Ekadasi.
Yeah, we shall have the by Vaishnava Prabhu. We shall have the closing kirtan now by Vaishnava Prabhu. You're muted, Prabhu.
Sukhavak will continue with the kirtan.
Okay. Prabhu, please, you can go ahead. Hare Krishna.